Welcome back. You tuned into Mid Morning Talk with me, your host Maria Mia, and only on Salam Media. And now we're putting the spotlight on, yes, our vocation, journalism. And yes, journalism is fastly evolving with the advent of the internet. And now in 2022, people consume news via online social platforms. And also, we've seen people who now become journalists themselves. They at an issue or where the action is, and they give live reporting, and then journalists then pick up stories from what's happening online in the digital space, what is being reported. Yes, sometimes you are at an incident and then you start recording the incident, and maybe then you then provide some commentary or provide context to that incident, and thereafter you find many media houses then picking up on your story that you have then posted on social media. And for the last 2 weeks, I think, even with the invasion of Ukraine, I mean, many of the tweets we get, or some of the video coverage, has been from actual people who are on the scene that are videoing their perception, their experiences. And last week, when the whole Hello Darling saga unfolded, the whole saga was in the virtual space, the digital space, from the manner in which the products were advertised, the trips were booked, and then thereafter the news broke. It was all virtual. So today, to help us understand and make sense of these interesting, exciting times, and also how the direction that journalism is heading, I'm here to speak to Cape Town born journalist and filmmaker Amina Frense. She has produced several documentaries on former South African President Nelson Mandela, including the Oscar nominated Mandela, Son of Africa, Father of a Nation. And she's currently a board member of the Institute of the Advancement of Journalism. So let me welcome her to Mid Morning Talk. Good afternoon, Amina. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Mid Morning Talk here on Salam Media.
Thank you, Miriam. Alaikum salam, and also greetings to all the listeners.
So for me, as somebody in the media space, this is exciting times for us, revolutionary times, and also it's changing times to be in this media space. But at the same time, I think journalists who are conventional or traditional by the space, by training, struggling, where do we fit in terms of reporting? And I find that normally journalists are the ones that go out there in search of stories and break the news. And now, especially in last week's cases and what's happening, we are now reporting after the fact. So how do you make sense of this, and how do you process where do journalists fit in today's digital era, in online era?
I think journalists fit very well in today's environment and today's online era. There certainly is much more accessibility on the one hand. For example, if a country tries to censor, close down, and control what is going out of the country by way of what the truth is, there will always be individuals somewhere who are able to participate and participate via social media, participate via the internet, and feed the outside world on what is going on there. I'm thinking specifically of the Russia-Ukraine war at the moment, and there's accessibility because of social media and the internet, which was not there some years back. But at the same time, it also confuses the whole environment in terms of sifting through what is fact and what is fiction, what is propaganda, what is the truth. Of course, there are penalties, for example, in Russia and other parts of the world as well, for daring to communicate with the media outside the country, for daring to reveal what is happening on the ground. So that is the Ukraine situation, but there are other hotspots, if you like, warlike situations, and there are terrible atrocities going on in the world right now. So if it hadn't been for social media and the ordinary person who's a non-journalist getting involved and caring and sharing, we would be poorer, I think. But having said that, I think it's a question of what your beat is as a journalist. We've moved a long way from just having a geographic footprint. So, for example, a newspaper which is sold only in the Johannesburg area, you can't only, report on what is happening in the Johannesburg area for Johannesburg readers, etc. It is much, much wider. The world just demands that. So whether we like it or not, I think the world is connected. There's more connectivity, and we can't just be in our little box or in our previously geographic area. So from that point of view, it is an exciting place. It's an exciting environment. We are forced to learn more about what's happening outside our area, our region, and in the wider world. And that is important to remember. But that also opens up, more readers to an empathetic situation of what is happening in other parts of the world, not just in your neighborhood. And for that matter, there should be, I think, because of the media, because of journalism, because of social media, because of other people other than journalists reporting on what the situation is in a particular area, country. I think there's a broader understanding of what is happening, more empathy, and also perhaps solidarity and perhaps a faster solution or resolution to what the causes of the conflicts are. I think if the public understands, the citizenry understands, the politicians, world leaders understand more in terms of the information that they have access to because of technology. I think that would enable us to live in a more just, peaceful, and equitable society. We hope. We hope.
And Amina, so before I move on to the social media space in terms of, influencers and bloggers, and they then, making headlines and that, while we're talking about the Ukraine issue, something for me, I find that have not evolved and still primes people's minds is when it comes to reporting on conflict areas of war, there's still this superiority and, for me, underlying tone of racism in terms of reporting and coverage. I'm quoting for Alan McLeod on Twitter, and he says the most racist Ukraine coverage on TV. He quotes the BBC. The BBC says it's it's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, and that's Ukraine's deputy chief prosecutor. Then there is another one that says this isn't Iraq. This is CBS News saying this isn't Iraq or Afghanistan. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European city. Um, Thereafter, they've got Al Jazeera quoting. What's compelling is looking at them, the way they arrest. These are prosperous middle class people. They're not obviously refugees trying to get away from the Middle East or North Africa. They look like any European family that you'd live next door to. So if you can just give us this thought about, I don't know, is there a pecking order, or what a refugee should be, or is a refugee, and also the different treatments of so-called European refugees now coming out of Ukraine. And the couple of years we've seen the perilous journey that people of Syria had to take, crossing over the channel into Greece and then walking uh, miles and miles to then finally get refuge in a country like Germany, where the vice chancellor at the time, Chancellor Angela Merkel, decided to then take in the refugees from there. Why do we still have this type of bias reporting?
Miriam, it is a shocking, shame that this terminology can be used by the media, whether big or small, whether Al Jazeera or BBC or CNN or our own media. I think it's a shocking shame to discriminate on a almost a racial and demographic basis. Refugees are refugees. They're fleeing their lives. They're leaving behind all their worldly material possessions, and to discriminate between Palestinian refugees who have been bombed for how many years, that have been robbed of their land, their livelihood, their homes have been demolished. To distinguish between or discriminate between those kind of refugees or the refugees in Myanmar, or the refugees in Sudan or the DRC Congo, wherever they are fleeing from, to discriminate against them in favor of, blue-eyed middle-class people that, those uh, media colleagues of mine can relate to. It's a shocking shame. There's no other word for it. They have failed the journalism profession. There needs to be balance. There needs to be fairness, and that kind of terminology just cannot be tolerated or left to just be acceptable. They're blue-eyed and they're well-dressed and they're middle class and they're European. They're not barefoot and hungry Arabs or Muslims somewhere else, or black people somewhere else who are fleeing a war zone. That shouldn't be tolerated. And I think the world, the media fraternity, shouldn't tolerate them. It's right that they're being called out, and I think they need to correct their ways. I hope that it will not be repeated, and I hope they'll be reprimanded, whether it is internally or internationally, globally. That is just unacceptable. The people of Ukraine are fleeing a real war. They're fleeing with their lives. They may be closer to Europe. They may have relatives in Europe. They may have somewhere to go, somewhere to sleep, food to eat, and welcomed with open arms, in another fellow European country. But do not turn away, our black students, for example, as we've seen at the borders, because they don't have the papers or they don't have visas or they're not allowed to be in the other European country. And that is, in reality, what is happening on the ground today. They are stuck, and some of them will lose their lives and whatever possessions they might have. Their world is also turned upside down. So that discrimination is there, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that my media colleagues, big media, small media, as I've said, are not careful with their terminology. It is a careless situation, careless in every sense of the word. That shouldn't be able to happen. They are discrediting the journalism profession. If that were to happen here on our doorstep in South Africa, will we tolerate it? No. Why should we tolerate any other media reporting the way they are? So I think international bodies need to get involved there. They either need to go back to school, back to the drawing board, but this just cannot be tolerated. We have to be very, very careful. But in our own society, there's also discrimination. Um, uh, some people I know are more likely to welcome, a well-dressed person into their home and give them assistance than someone that is not so well dressed. I won't even go into what color that person is, but it happens. It happens. I think there's a bias. There's probably a natural bias, which shouldn't be there at all. And when I say natural, that's not the right word to use. There's a bias. It shouldn't be there. People are people. We are human beings. We can relate to them. We can empathize with them, whether they are dirty, whether they are clean, whether they are white, whether they are yellow, whether they are black. There needs to be that empathy. There shouldn't be that bias at all. So it's
And I,
unfortunate,
mhm.
but we shouldn't tolerate it. And you're right to publicize it on Salam media, and for it to be called out in other media as well, where I've seen these things reported.
And I think that's where digital social media keeps media houses, journalism in check, is because these things can be called out in a matter of hours that they've been released. If there's a pattern of racial profiling or racial bias, it's called out on Twitter. It trends, and media houses, journalists are forced to then reflect upon the manner in which they're reporting. And I think it makes them more responsible and cognizant that, you know what, if there's going to be the slant or this bias, you are going to get called out, whether you are CBS, whether you are Al Jazeera, or whatever news station you are on, you are going to be called out. And for me, I think social media is now holding mainstream media or conventional media to account in terms of the quality in the reporting, as well as the bias.
Yes, you're quite right. You know, with the advent of the internet and social media, one can talk more of a more democratized world we live in. You know, it's very difficult to lie when there's somebody else who's a witness, and put that out. You know, a counter view on social media. So it certainly helps in terms of a us being aware, and two, us not tolerating it, and calling them out. We're all connected globally, and that is the joys of technology, social media, and the internet that we didn't have in the past, as you know.
Amina, and also, but then again, with the advent of social media and digital media as well, there's a lot of fake news and fake reporting that happens, and it's difficult as a reader to then sift out truth from reality. And how does one go about then? Processing in terms of what I'm reading, is this correct, is this fake news? How do we navigate ourselves nowadays within this media space of information overload?
I think it's very difficult for anyone to distinguish, you know, what is fake and what is real. But I think we need to just take our time and reflect. For journalists in South Africa and elsewhere as well, you know, there are fact-checking bodies where you can put your facts to, and they could help and assess whether it's fact or fiction. But that's not always possible. For the ordinary person, we have to be careful if we see something that we not sure of, you know, not verified, not corroborated, or whatever. Don't pass it on. Don't spread what might be fake news. So I think we have to be more careful. We have to be super careful. We have to be very careful what we, in our own personal, you know, capacity, disseminate when it might not be true. And you know, there are lots of catch things like. One big department store is offering vouchers, and another one is offering cell phones, etc. A lot of those things are fake, and it's meant to trick people, and much more. So I think journalists and journalism, we have to be very careful. I think we trained to get another side, get a verified view. There needs to be checks and balances. So I think if we do our jobs correctly, it's a question of not trying to be the first and the fastest, but be sure of the facts. That is what counts. Long after you know report is out, people will remember that you put out fake news, and that is of course not good for your credibility as a person, and as a journalist, and media as well. So we have to be super careful. We have to be very careful. I think there needs to be more fact checkers in media houses. If if but if the bias that we talked about earlier on, the racial bias, the demographic bias, is meant to go out on air, I think that maybe the editors or the gatekeeping editors perhaps can be a little bit more active in preventing that from happening and prevent personal bias of coming through. Talking about blue eyes and European people, they from middle class area and all the things that we talked about. So I think there needs to be more editorial gatekeeping in terms of what the facts are and who are we competing with? We're competing against ourselves and our credibility, not against another media organization to be the fastest. You need to get the facts right. So I think it's back to basics and be very, very careful. But it is difficult. It is very, very difficult to verify immediately what the facts are. But bias and all those things, those can be prevented. Racism shouldn't be there, shouldn't be tolerated at all. Call out racism, call out bias, call out all of those things that we have control over. But what is fact and what is fiction is become very difficult because it's written so closely to what the truth would be. So it's a little difficult to verify, and the ordinary person might not have the means to verify that as well. Some journalists have, they're online, but the ordinary person is very, very difficult, and that is how rumors are spread. That is why untruths are spread. So before we are inadvertently also spreading untruths, I think rather hesitate and make sure that we're spreading the truth and not untruths, which can be very, very harmful.
Here as well, in terms of what you said, uh, the truth is more important than being the quickest and fastest with the breaking news. Maybe that little hesitant, but ensuring that you fact check, you've got the facts correctly before then making announcements or breaking news is more important, because at the end of the day, the truth will never expire. The truth is timeless, and also people will then trust that particular media brand or media house, in terms, so you develop trust with your listeners, with your readers as well, in terms of that. So sage advice indeed as well, Amina. And obviously you serve on the SA Press Council, so that is another body that keeps us all in check in terms of ensuring that news is reported accurately and truthfully without bias or discrimination.
Yes, indeed. The South African Press Council is a complaints mechanism for the ordinary person, public person, ordinary person in the street, and it's used very, very widely. We have a good record of putting the facts straight. We have a good record of being fair, and we have a long list of people making use of the Press Council. Not only ordinary people, journalists, politicians, everyone, people from all walks of life, captains of industry, etc., make use of the Press Council to correct inaccuracies or misrepresentation in the print media as well as online media. So that is important. And the broadcasting side, there's a Broadcasting Complaints Commission, where broadcast complaints can be taken and adjudicated. So in South Africa, I think we're very proud and very happy to have these mechanisms, to where inaccuracies can be corrected. And I think more and more people will make use of these instruments. The South African Press Council, as well as the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, and it's becoming very difficult. I think for a lot of people, they don't even have access to, what is happening in the world, because if they're not on social media, don't have the internet, don't have access to data, etc. So it's important, that even those people, have have a say, can be heard, can complain, and get a fair hearing of what is inaccurate in newspapers, small newspapers, big media, and of course also in broadcasting.
Amina, thank you for your time and your input. It was a very insightful discussion for journalists as well as for listeners out there in terms of to hold to sort fact from fiction, and also you've said there's a mechanism for ordinary listeners to then, if there's any complaints, contact the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, or for print media, the SA Press Council. So there are mechanisms where you can hold journalists to account as well. And for your insight, it's always a pleasure having you here on Salam Media. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you to Salam Media as well for reporting broader than the little boxes that we are in. Thank you very much, Miriam.
It's a pleasure. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
Peace and
Alaikum
blessings to
salam.
you, Amina.
Thank you to you too.
We're going to take a short break. When we get back, yes, it's part of our advocacy and NPO segment.